it's showtime.
Hello.
Hello, Fatty. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yes. How's things in New York?
Pretty warm. It's pretty
Oh,
warm today. It's a beautiful day outside. I wish that we could do this outside, but it kind of crossed my mind. I was like, yeah, there might be some difficulty with the audio because it's very
there-
windy.
oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. It's I've often thought of that too, but I was just thinking of all the lawnmowers and everything else that are going on around my area. It might be a little bit more challenging. But no, please send some of that warm weather our way, okay? Like we're
Well,
still we're still in the little bit of it's warmer, but it still is not nearly summer yet. Yeah. So
I mean, it goes in between summer, fall, winter, spring. It just changes every day, keeps us on our toes.
yes, I noticed that. Yeah, it's hard. It's literally hard to dress. But you had a good week.
Had a pretty good week.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Good.
have
Good.
to say.
Yeah.
Very productive today. I love the days that I'm productive.
Oh.
I don't, I don't put too much expectation on them, but when they happen, I just, I'm grateful for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. I just came off. Well, it was a long weekend. It was part two of my train the trainer workshop. We had 20 other coaches in there, and we were doing a train the trainer. And so that was 2 full days plus 2 hours on Friday. And on Monday, I didn't want to sit near a computer. As a matter of fact, I shut everything down shortly after the show or after the workshop and just did everything but, um, got off Facebook, got off everything. And then I just find sometimes you just have to get that break in, right? You just have to just get away from the atmosphere, do something totally different, and come back refreshed. And here I am, all refreshed.
Yeah, I mean, I totally hear you on that. I mean, I love what I do. Love what I do. I think we have the most amazing job in the world, and yet it keeps us in front of the screen a lot.
Yeah.
Um, because unless you do your coaching sessions out, and about or face to face, there's a lot of Zoom calls.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so that's the only part where, like, recently I felt like, oh, now that it's nice outside, I kind of want to be out there. And at the same time, that kind of prompted me to create an opportunity for myself to have that outside of Zoom and
Yeah.
outside of, like the four walls that I work in, and create a meetup group where we will be meeting up, in person. So I'm really excited about that. We haven't met up in person yet, but we will. Yeah, it's going to be really cool to just meet people in our day to day,
Yeah.
the like-minded people.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love it that from a pain point, right? From
Yeah.
feeling like I
Yeah.
was missing something, I
Yeah.
kind of like took action. Instead, I complained about it for a little bit. Let's be honest, right? A little
Well,
self
hey,
pity for a while, right?
are
And
you
then
telling
I
me
was
you're
like,
human? You're human, aren't
I'm
you?
human. I'm
Yeah.
human like everybody else. And I was like, what can I do about it?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I can just create a group and connect, and let people that, resonate with my message and with the work that I do and with this kind of, self work and transformation
Mhm.
work, just come to me, right?
Yeah.
Just connect with me and let's
Yeah.
just meet in person and talk about this stuff. So
Oh, that's
super
awesome.
excited about that. And yes, I completely like agree with you. Sometimes you just need to walk away from it, right? Leave it,
Yeah.
just
You
go
need that.
outside
You
and be
need
in the
that.
world.
I call it whatever it is, grounding. You need to get recentered, refocused, all this kind of. Because sometimes you just feel like the not so much the energy rabbit, but you're just ricocheting all over the place. It's like you're not focused and so you were making reference to your tribal meetings that you
Yes,
started last week.
It started last week. It
Yes.
started last week. So I decided each week after each episode that we have to do like a more of a coaching session where
Yeah.
we dive a little bit deeper into the
Yeah.
topics that
Yeah.
we discuss, you and I here,
Yeah.
and to just help people with, the questions that they have and like practical tips and, help them kind of reframe things and shift a little bit the way they see things. And it was really, really successful, went really well.
Good. Good.
So
Because
very
obviously,
excited.
we can't we can't go too deep. I mean, most of what we talk about, we kind of get at the surface. We sometimes go a little deeper between the two of us, and apparently that showed up quite readily in our show last week on boundaries. So,
Notice everyone, there's a different Rick today.
I don't know. Wait, when we get into relationships, that might change. I don't know. Might be a
Oh.
different Rick showing up, but yeah, no, I no, I don't necessarily watch the broadcast over again, but you have tweaked my interest, and you said, oh, you've got to watch it again, and it's like okay, so
You
yeah,
can up the speed, by the way. You can just listen to it faster.
yes, true,
So it won't take as much time.
as much time, yeah, no, we'll look into it for sure. Anyways, thanks everybody for joining us. Good to see you again, Adina and Angela,
Hello,
coming
ladies.
back so regularly. We love our
Always,
yeah,
always here. We love them. We feel
yeah,
so loved. Thank
yeah,
you.
and great feedback too, and we really appreciate the comments. Everybody gives us. And
Yeah, absolutely. All of our Mind Valley friends,
yeah,
a part of
yeah,
Mind Valley. I absolutely love the platform, the work they're doing. I work with EverCoach.
it's an
It's an
incredible,
amazing community.
it's
Yes.
amazing
So
community
welcome.
and an incredible thing that was created there, both from the Mind Valley side and the EverCoach side.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
best bang for the buck kind of a thing. And anybody that's interested in coaching or interested in that work, go check it out. I mean, there's so much there. All the mastermind classes and or
But
master.
also the love, the way it brings, communities together and like brings people that are aligned with this type of work
Yeah,
together. It's a certain type of person. So everyone on there is very unique and special in that way.
yeah. Well, we're seven. How many people are in the world, anyways?
I have no idea. Don't ask me
I have no
numbers.
idea. There's a lot of
Seven
people in.
billion.
There's at least a billion people. Yeah, but
7 billion, I
we
think.
I like to remind people that we are all separate expressions, right? We are
Yeah.
all unique, and we must celebrate our uniqueness, right? I mean, we all got our little quirks, we all got our little whatever you want to call it, but uh, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why you're unique because everybody sees things a little bit differently, and and
Uh-huh.
that's almost a segue into relationships. I don't
A
know.
perfect way into
I
it,
don't know. I'm
right?
not sure. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But
Yeah, I think that is the perfect way to start. I love that you started in that direction. You started it that way because that's a fundamental of understanding relationships is that,
yeah,
right? That we all have these unique lenses that we look through.
very
So
much
if
so.
you don't understand that, then you know, that's something to consider because that's where you run into problems, right?
Well, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, even I'm getting a little goosebumps. So I think we're kind of connected on one really I think significant point is because of that uniqueness, and you know where we get into trouble is when we don't recognize that, or there's we feel there's something wrong with what what we're seeing from the other person, or
Mhm.
we think from our own point of view too, so that there's a disconnect between that.
And I mean, let's even say that something, a situation does feel wrong to you, right? That's not really the important piece of this, right? The
Hmm.
important piece of this is understanding that everyone sees things through their own lens, right?
Yeah.
And this lens is formed through their history, their childhood, their experiences, right?
Yeah.
And based on that level of understanding, where they're at in that moment, they always do the best that they can, right? Everyone acts from, a place of really doing the best that they can in that moment, because if they could do better, they would,
Well,
right?
100%, 100%. And yeah, does everybody act in a loving, creative way? No. And so I like to think about, okay, so what is actually happening? Like where is the disconnects really happening? Like what you're seeing, um, and one of the things that often comes up when we talk about relationships is the ones that are not going so well, like the ones that have some violence or abuse, gaslighting, all those other kinds of behavior. But it still comes down to that person is still acting in accordance to the best thinking that they can do in that moment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to kind of lead into what I would like people to understand about relationships, that no matter what the circumstances or no matter what the other person does, this goes back to all that we ever talk about. All that you can do about it is what you can do for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Is to look at yourself, understand yourself, reflect on who you are, what you want. What is it that I truly want? Does it align with my values? Are my values still current? Right? Because oftentimes we think that we believe in something because we always believed it, right? And we talk about this often too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Comes from conditioning, comes from upbringing, comes from society, comes from the teachers we've had, the parents we've had, right? Maybe we think that we want something, but we never really sat down and reflected on it, right?
Yeah.
So really, that reflective piece serves us in so many different ways, also in relationships, right? Because the moment that you know what it is that you want, and we talked about this with boundaries last week, then you can assert that, right? Sorry, I won't use that word again.
It's fine. It's fine.
But so it really comes from understanding that oftentimes the problem that arises, it arises because we expect something that the other person cannot give us. We think that our view is the only view or the right view, right? Without really coming out of
Yeah.
our own perspective and having more of a objective, observer's view, right? Really seeing the other, or even putting ourselves into the other person's shoes, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes and we expect people to read minds and to know what we want, right? And oftentimes we have that expectation of others. And when we do go and do this deep dive reflective work on ourselves, we discover that we didn't really know ourselves, right? So really knowing who we are, where we come from, what we want, what makes us feel happy, without the conditioning around it, without the things that we think that we want or that we should want, right? Because that's what society thinks is right,
Yeah.
or whatever it is, right? That's a
All those.
very important piece.
100%. The whole. I mean, I like what you're pointing to. The expectations, conditioning, right? Because there is a thing called unconditional love, right?
Hmm.
Which means love from with no conditions, right? So when I look, um, you know, towards, we're all in relationships, right? Whether relationships with our children, relationships with people at work, relationships with our significant others. There's always a relationship going on. And you're absolutely correct when it says when there's an expectation or a condition that I feel has to be met for me to, well, to be loved, right, or to whatever it is that I think. If there's a need to, it's an outside condition, and outside conditions just don't work, right? Because it's an inside. it's an inside out. So
Mm-hmm.
what I find, what creeps up, and I'm human, is I have to watch my moods, because when I'm in a low mood, conditions seem to be more important. Kind of a thing. Like when everything's going well, kind of a thing, and you're in a good mood, a lot of things just seem to slide.
Well, because again, it goes back to what we were even talking about last week. I'm saying I have to do something again.
Are you
My
kids playing
children,
your
my
children?
children, and their fingerprints. Sorry.
That's fine. Oh, look,
Whenever I look cloudy, I'm like, they did it again. And now I lost my train of thought. Um, what were you saying? Throwing the ball back at
see,
you.
you know,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. I got it back. So it goes back to what we were talking about before, right? So
yeah,
the moment that you get into the fear state, the
yeah,
lower level vibrational,
yeah.
like
Lower
fight or
mind.
flight,
Yeah,
then that is the agenda, right? My needs need to be met. You become needy and you become defensive and you become closed off.
yeah,
But if you're coming from a place of knowing, you know, yourself, knowing what you want, understanding that others are not doing this to you,
yeah,
right? They're
yeah,
just doing the best that they can, right? Then you're shifting into a higher state of being,
yeah.
and therefore you're making, more empowering decisions, and you're going to have more empowering results, right?
Well,
As a result of that.
and the one thing I've noticed that, coming out of a low state, right, is that what I considered a problem in the lower state wasn't a problem anymore. Like the
It
problem
was no
wasn't there,
problem. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like this sliding scale. Like, the lower my mood, the needier I become, and the more I'm taking it personal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know, and I think that's a key indicator, particularly in relationships, because if you have a really strong relationship with your partner, and it doesn't matter where it is, it could be a personal one, or like a work relationship, um, they're the feedback,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're the feedback. So that's another thing. Like if I see something that's irritating me or rubbing me, it's like, oh, stay away from the hot stove. You know?
I mean, guess what? When you go in it with a clean slate, right, where you have done the inner work, you have looked in the mirror, and you have really done the work and seen all the places where like your insecurities come from, the rejection, right? So when you've done the inner work,
Yeah.
then you show up in a relationship owning all that and not putting it on the other person, right?
No.
Because
Right.
oftentimes that's where things go wary, right?
Yeah.
Because we have this discomfort inside and we are looking for someone to complete us. We're looking for someone to fill in the gaps,
Yeah.
right?
Because we feel like
Where no,
we're missing. There's something.
because we have those gaps,
Yeah.
right? So it's important to understand that no one is going to come in and fill those gaps for you, right? Anyone can just add to you with their uniqueness,
Yeah.
right? But no one's going to fill in your own holes, if we want to call them holes, or places where
Yeah.
work needs to be done, healing needs to happen, right? So the more you work on yourself and you really enrich and clarify and kind of heal that relationship with yourself, and the more you're going to show up as that person,
Yeah.
right? Because you no longer need someone to come and heal you and fix you and fill you in, right? Now you can just show up and like enrich them, add to them,
Well,
right?
and that's getting rid of the conditions. That's getting rid of the expectations.
Yeah, the
That's right.
expectations. Yeah,
Getting
expectations
getting
are a big deal.
getting that out of the way. Like I was talking to another coach this morning about, we have this expression, we often throw out, but I'm not sure everybody really truly understands. Um, we talk about getting out of your way,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Getting out of your way. Well, first of all, okay, so we were having a little fun with it because I said, okay, so what exactly are we getting out of the way, and who's getting out of the way? Kind of
Hmm.
like,
Yeah, us.
right, yeah, well, yeah, yeah. So, but a lot of that is that habitual conditioned thinking that we have that really is a wall of thought. It's the wall of thought that's getting in the way. And so when we say getting out of the way, we look at it for what it is, and when we can get behind that or in front of it, depending on how you want to approach it, um, we can see what it really is, right? Just data, just information, just right. And there's a gap between our feelings and our actions, and if we spend more time in that gap rather than in a reactive mode, it's like, oh, somebody's making me mad or whatever it is, we'll realize we can go back and ask ourselves, okay, do I really truly understand the situation? Do I really know what's going on? Is it me in projection mode? Am I just in an upset state? Do I need a vacation? Kind of
Yeah.
a, you
Yeah,
know,
I mean, I would say what you're pointing to makes me think of the gap can be there. We often doesn't give it space
yeah,
because we go into reaction, right? We skip it. We skip that moment where we can stop it and we can just look at things from an observer's view, or like let our emotions express, right? We always go back to that too. Let
yeah.
the charge come out so that we can do that work, right? Because oftentimes the charge, so the emotion comes and like we react, right? And
Yeah.
it's very, very, very often not the appropriate reaction, right? Very,
Well,
very
not
often
in
not
the
an empowering reaction,
well,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just going to put up what Neil put up here. Thanks, Neil, for joining us. He says,
I
focus and
love
give
that.
energy to the things you can control. Absolutely. And understand that the past is gone and the future does not exist. Embrace and live every moment because it will never be now again. 100%. And
So true.
and and one of the things, actually, we were talking about it in the coaching circle this morning, was about, like, every moment is fresh and new.
Every
Every
instant,
moment,
yeah, yeah.
right? It is totally fresh and new. What we tend to do is we take our path, like we live each experience once, but then it becomes memory. So we're living from memory as opposed to looking at things as fresh and new, right? Say, oh, you're always doing that. You're always leaving your clothes on the floor. You're all, those kind of things, right? You're reacting on a loop and not looking at things fresh and new from a new perspective. And,
Absolutely.
can you imagine, waking up every morning almost like Groundhog Day, right? In the sense, well, you know what I mean? Like it's,
Some
yes,
days
it's
do
the
feel
same
that
house.
way.
Yes, it's the house. It's all the, but you every day you have a second chance. Like every moment you have
I
that.
mean, really, every moment you have a chance to
Yes,
create something new, right? So you
yeah,
have to focus on that. And you also have to give the grace of that to others, right?
absolutely.
Right.
Everybody has that
So
opportunity.
really always understand that even in situations where someone is hurting you or showing up in a way that's, disempowering or even toxic, always understand that they may be going through a tough time in that moment. And that is the best that they can do in that moment.
Yeah.
And yes, people can change. And also remember, you're not in charge of their change. You cannot impose that on anyone. You cannot expect that from anyone. And I think that going back into the topic of relationships, that's very much a big part of it, right? We expect people to change the way we want to kind of mold them and try and fix them into
Well, that's
who
part
we,
of the
we
conditioning.
think they should be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When we truthfully, in a sense, what I've noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that need is even more prominent when the person really actually needs to do that for themselves,
Well, that's
right?
where it's coming from. It's coming
Yeah,
from
it's
that,
coming
right?
from that, right? So you're kind of trying to control others when really what needs to happen is inner work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's an inner work of acceptance and individuality and discovering who you are, what works for you. Where have you shown up that wasn't empowering, that was hurtful, that was, and all your role, your only role is to have compassion with others and decide whether or not someone's energy, personality, what they have to give is something that you can benefit from and that you want to have around, right?
Well, and
But we
that's true.
often kind
Yeah.
of dodge that,
Yeah.
right? Because we want to make things fit, right? The square peg into the round hole, right? Well, we just want to make it fit because it's a lot easier, we think we bring ourselves to believe that it's easier to try and fix somebody else than perhaps sometimes make a harder decision around, what, this doesn't work for me, right? And where can I connect with this person where we do connect? And how can I stop connecting in the places that trigger me, that don't serve me, that feel toxic? And just really kind of put it on the scale. Are there enough things that I get from this relationship that it's worth for me to be here? Understanding that the condition is I have to respect the rest of the person, right? The person is who they are,
Hmm.
and I am accepting you for who you are, and here's where we connect and where this relationship is enriching for me. What doesn't work for me, I will make decisions around that, right? Maybe we won't talk every 5 minutes, or we won't hang out every night, right? Maybe we'll connect once a week because that feels healthier. That's what I need, right, from this relationship. Maybe I won't go and watch, I don't know, a soccer game with you if you hate that. That's, I'm gonna have to hear you complain. I'm gonna pick someone that likes that and go do that with that person, right? So it's really about understanding what you want, knowing what your guidelines are. Notice I didn't use the word, and what the person's guidelines are, right? And what the other person or people in your life,
Yeah.
what are their likes? What do they enjoy doing? Do they even understand it? But really understanding that that's on them. You're not here to do the work for them,
No,
right?
no. And what I would like to add is it's important to know where your level of consciousness is, like where your moods are, where your feelings are. Because if you are making decisions like what you're talking about in a low mood state, it becomes more reactive and more stringent, more more guidelines, more
And
conditions.
needy
It
too,
becomes more
right?
needy. So all
Yeah.
those things become, like okay, if they're not there, then I'm leaving. Like if right, all I'm saying is if you come away from that, like no, I've never seen a good decision ever made in a mad or in a low state that's ever produced a good result, right? It's usually hurt somebody or it's hurt you, or there's something going wrong. But if we step away, even if it's just for a moment or if it's just for a day, whatever it takes to get into a more quieter, less busier mind, then you can start to look at things more objectively, right? You can respond to what's going on as opposed to react to what's going on. And from that point, you know what? If it looks like this is not working, then at least you're coming from a higher state of understanding than from a reactive state, right? So yeah, and other ideas might come up. There could be, um, you could look at things differently. You can look at, one of the conditions, and I'll, I don't mind being open about it, but there was a time that with my relate, and I've been married now. Now I'm on the spot. 44
You did
years.
it to yourself.
44 years.
Wow.
Um, and has it been smooth sailing? In the beginning there was conditions, right? Like I learned really quickly what worked and didn't work, kind of a thing, right? Um, and but if I took those things that didn't work and I kept them and said, they become a condition, right? I would not be married right now. I know that, right? But I
I
started
mean,
to
it's,
I started to look at what was really truly important for me, right? And I'm not talking about compromises and giving in and having a pleasing mindset. Those are all sort of, for me, negative connotations. But I'm talking about really understanding what my true values were,
mhm.
getting back to what was really true for me, and then noticing that, okay, I had a rough day at work, right? And not taking that into the home space, right? And leaving whatever bad calls I had away from that environment, because they had no place in the home, right? But if I started to take that environment and say, and put it into the home, and it would create conditions that could never be met, right? So
I mean,
I think there's a lot of responsibility on my part, right, to create that good relationship.
I mean, it's the responsibility is always on us to know ourselves, right? To
Yeah.
know what fits us, what our values are, right? And really making space and time for that, right? What happens when you're in a relationship is that you bring that in there in the form of this is important to me,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
it's important that I make space for this. What is important to you and what is important to us together, right? And how can we make sure that we create the space for that and we meet there where our interests cross, where we want to spend time together, we want to create things together, right? But I think it's always important to really have the individuality of each person, being met and like
Well,
fulfilled
and
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 seen,
honored for that,
right?
right? I mean,
And
it's not
honored,
every
right?
right. If one person, and this is a obscure, because anybody that knows me, this isn't necessarily true, but if one person likes to watch hockey and the other person likes to watch baseball, right? And I invite the other person, and it's like let's watch baseball. And no, I prefer hockey, right? That does not mean they don't love you, kind of a thing,
So
right?
I mean, it goes back to what I was saying, right?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it's don't force your partner to come and watch that video if that's not something they
No,
enjoy.
but
Go
it's so very,
connect with someone that
yeah,
enjoys that
yeah,
and do that with that person,
yeah.
right? So it's a lot about that, and that goes into the bucket of expectations, right? I expect my partner to do everything with me and love everything that I love. Well, guess what? That's impossible because that
Well,
person
first of
is
all,
not you,
they're leading a
right?
different life for sure, right? Yeah, absolutely. I
I
mean,
mean,
we might be in the same household, but we see things differently, right?
we
We're
see things
experiencing
different, we
life.
enjoy different things, right? And
We're
it's healthy to have that separation because you're not the same person, right? You
no, I
are
I actually find it quite enriching to have
absolutely.
to hear a different perspective, right? Like I sometimes I sometimes I sometimes say to my wife, I says, it's like, okay, I know we have separate perspectives on things, but when do I get to be right?
The ego, right? When do I get to be right? But and like the other thing that I think it's important for us to touch upon, since we're talking about relationships, is like, okay, so once you've done all this work, you understand what you value and what aligns with you and what it is that you want, right?
But yeah, that's
Now,
a huge one.
yeah,
Yeah.
now you can't just sit there with it. You got to share it because again, no one is a mind reader. Okay.
Are
If
you
you
when you
had to,
No, I disagree. I think women can read men's minds.
well, I mean, listen, if you yourself had to go sit down and do some reflective work to
Yeah,
understand what you really, really enjoy and like and who you are and what your values are,
yeah.
how is somebody else going to know that just because,
No,
right?
no.
Just because they know you, they're not. So communicating that is a very crucial piece of that, right? Piece of relationships. Relationships are based on communication, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Communicating without judgment, communicating without blaming, communicating without accusations,
yeah.
right? And there's some tips that we could get into in terms of how to communicate effectively when you feel like obviously situations happen where you feel wronged, right? Where you feel like the person has been disrespectful, or so there's a way to communicate that's much more effective than just pointing the finger and blaming,
There's
right?
actually a really good book, although it wasn't in our top three, or did we have a top six? I can't remember.
Top
Um,
six.
it was a
What
top
was
six.
three
Yeah,
and three? Yeah,
three and three. Okay.
yeah.
Is and you can look it up in on the web. It's called Crucial Conversations, and I took their workshop and found it was really interesting because it delved into uh, the classification of a crucial conversation was those conversations that are just brewing in your head, right? They're not real, they're brewing in your head, right? You're anticipating what the other person's going to say, you're having all this dialogue. It's crucial because you need to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Like there's
Yes.
something that you're holding on to, not letting go, and you need to have it. Now there's a way of having it. First of all, you know, never have it in a low mood state. Um, but yeah, no, there's some
So,
really good tips and hints on.
so I would say to that, right, since you're bringing up this point, right, the conversation that needs to be had is just like an emotion that needs to be expressed, right? So the more the conversation is charged and you keep it there brewing and bubbling up, and the more charged up it's going to become,
Yeah,
right? So at some point you're going to learn to be a better communicator and more effective, right? But that only happens through repetition, like all things, right? If you're not someone that communicates effectively, if you've been raised to blame and point fingers and criticize, it's going to take some time to make that shift, right? So it's not just because you intellectually understand how effective communication works that you're going to become an effective communicator, right? So
no,
let's just put that
no,
out there.
there's a bit of
So
doing in there. Just
right,
because you're
so
reading a book does not mean,
exactly.
yeah,
So what can you do, right, to start stepping into that? One thing is if it's really brewing up and it's like a contentious type of conversation that you're picturing in your mind or envisioning having, and you can't have it and you have all this stuff around it, have the conversation with your chair. I love the empty
love your
chair,
chair, don't
right?
you?
Well, express all the feelings of anger and blame and criticism that you want to express, that you
Yeah,
feel like are there, right? Don't deny them, don't judge them, and don't be like, go away, because it's not going to go away.
no,
Express it. You don't have to express it to the person. You can release it, right? By either writing it, you can, journal around it, you can just record yourself, you can talk to a chair, rehearse the conversation. What happens is you hear yourself and you find the best way to say that, right, as you repeat it. B, you're releasing the charge behind it, right? You're releasing that emotion, you're releasing the anger, you're releasing all of the things that are bubbling up. And by rehearsing it, now you get a better idea of, oh, maybe it doesn't really matter for me to go to that, to the smallest
yeah,
detail. What is the real concept? What is the point that I want to get across, right? So that's one way to actually show up and set yourself up, right? That's a before. And then when you have the conversation, I always suggest to people, don't ever use the word you. Like, always use the word I. This is how I feel. Always refer to your feelings.
hmm,
This is the way it makes me feel. I wonder, if we could try something different. Or like the other day when we had that conversation, what I heard you say was, and that was hurtful to me, right? It hurt my feelings. This is the way it felt for me, right? So always bring it back to I, always bring it back to, this is how I feel. This is the way I heard it. This is the way I, perceived it, right? It's very, very different than saying, you said that to me and you made me feel this way and you did this to me,
and
right?
that comes from a supercharged,
Supercharged place, but also,
right?
so even if you're not charged and you don't understand that, so this is where the skill comes in and the understanding that,
A little
right,
practice.
always refer to your own feelings,
Yeah,
because guess what, no one can deny your feelings. They're your feelings. No one gets to decide what they feel like. No one gets to decide what they're like. They're yours and your own. You don't even understand them
and
sometimes,
nobody
right?
should judge your feelings.
And nobody should judge your feelings, right? And guess what? But if you're going to blame and point the finger, you're the one judging. And guess what that's going to bring? More
Totally.
judgment and more blaming, right? It's
Well,
going to make the
because you
person
got
defensive.
two
Yeah.
intellects, two intellects, right? That's basically one has to be right, and for the other one to be right, the other one has to be wrong. Both are playing that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both are playing that game, right? And
From fight or flight at this point. We're both in
absolutely,
fight or flight.
absolutely.
Yes.
But if you take that away, come from a more quieter space, right? Whatever it is that you need to do to get grounded, it's from that place. You're not talking to the intellect anymore. It's more of a soul to soul, heart to heart
Mm-hmm. Heart to heart
conversation,
conversation.
right?
Yes.
And we even mentioned those things. Like we said, can I have a heart to heart conversation with you, right? Like get rid of the ego out of the mix, right? I just want to. I
Get
just
rid of right or wrong, right?
all judgment,
But
right?
and at the same time, you can state what are your non-negotiables. You can state what your values are. Like being spoken to that way is not something that feels good to me. It's triggering, it's offensive, and it's not something that I want to be exposed to,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
that's very different than saying like you fucking whatever,
What?
like you are so rude to me. I use the F
Okay, I
word.
got to talk to you about boundaries here. I have
you hurt my feelings, right? That is unacceptable to me, right? It just lands so differently because it comes from a place of you fully owning yourself, showing the other person that you yourself respect you, right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
is something that I am not willing to put up with. That is something that is not acceptable to me, and I don't want to be in this situation again. I wonder what we can do to avoid this from happening. I understand that you were very upset. I understand that that's the best that you could do in that moment, and it's unacceptable to me. What can we do? Right? That's very different than saying, you did this to me, it's absolutely unacceptable. I never want to talk to you again. Or, like I think you're delivering the same message. You're just saying it in a very different way.
well, in a more there, one is very just like almost like destroying, taking away, right? One is being more creative and more
Empathetic, right?
empathetic, more from a compassionate point of view, an understanding level, right? Trying to find, okay, so what is really going on here? Given the fact that we're all acting in accordance to, our best level of thinking in the moment, right? Even and I know there are extreme examples of that especially when it comes to
Mhm.
abusive relationships.
And
Like there are
that's a different that's a slightly different
it's a
conversation that we
slightly
can touch
different
upon. Yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
absolutely. And so we're not looking at people staying in relationships that are in that kind of abusive, right?
Hmm.
we're,
Yeah.
for me, I mean, there's several different layers, but one of them that I think is more prevalent is when you come out of the honeymoon stage and then you find out, oh, okay, this is who I married. All righty,
Mm.
but
Well, that was a long honeymoon. If you're already married to that person, it took you
well,
a little bit to figure that
well,
out.
I'm old school, okay? But I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting. People will say it's like you know, I love this guy, like or I love this woman, and but something's changed. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
What has changed?
Well, guess what? Something always will change because we are ever evolving. We're not sitting still. We're growing. We're having more
Yes, we're
experiences. We're
growing. We're
getting
getting
older,
grayer.
right? So, of course, people change. Of course, you change. Of course, the other person changes, right? So you can grow together and like do check in with each other, right? If the love and the values are there, and you truly want to be with this person, it's an ever it's an ever evolving process, right? It's always happening. You're always growing together. You're always checking in with each other. You're always
Some
adjusting,
ways you're
right?
recreating the relationship moment by moment. Every
you
like
are you
yeah,
are
Yeah.
And when you do communicate in the way that I was, giving an example of, you're also showing that you have done the work on yourself, that you really know what's right for you and what's not right for you, versus, when you say you talk to me that way, that's not it's all, you're putting yourself in the victim place,
Yeah.
right? Like,
No.
you
Yeah.
talk to me like this and you did this to me. It's almost like, um, it almost gives you the feeling that that is something that, I don't know how to explain it. Like, that is something that is happening to you, right?
Right.
That you have no power over, right? Whereas when you stated with, this is not something that I'm willing to put up with or accept, it's a very, very, very clear message, right? That is not a place that I'm going to let anyone go anymore, because I respect myself too
Yeah.
much, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so like the way the message is communicated, right, is crucial.
Yeah.
Now, right, all this being said, you did your work, you released the charge, you rehearsed the conversation. I'm just giving all these steps if you're someone who never had any, powerful communication skills, or you feel like you don't know how to communicate, right? So now you show up, you have your conversation. Then there's the rest of it, right? The rest of it is, there is another person involved, and that person's going to make the decisions that they're going to make, right? Now, what you're left with is not the fixing, right? And the criticizing, the constant criticism, and the reminding and throwing in somebody's face. At some point, you have to trust that the person is either going to do the work and show up differently, or they're not. And now you're in that place that I think most people feel really uncomfortable, where you have to decide, do I want to stay in this relationship? Do I want to leave? Do I want to put up with this part of it? But obviously, if it's a friendship, it's a little bit easier to kind of steer away from the parts that don't fit for you, and like really deciding, okay, are there enough things that keep me in this relationship, right? And if it's a partnership, then that's going to take a little bit longer, right? You're not going to make a decision like that based on one incident, right?
Well, let's hope you wouldn't.
You wouldn't, right? You allow the person to go through their process
Yeah.
of improving that, and like, you now you have to make your best judgment around, what the relationship is, how long are you willing to, stay in it, with those circumstances. But I'm talking about things that are a little bit more than just an argument, or like a big
Well,
conversation.
yeah, and I think, well, I don't know, it could be because of the years of going on, but what I one of the skills I've learned the most is really understanding where I am on the barometer of moods, right? Because I know that if I'm in a low mood, I don't care what's going on, everything looks bad. And so the world looks that way. So and if it just happens to be what's going on in front of the house, then it kind of looks that way, right? But I understand enough to know that that's a tainted view, right? It's a tainted view from my perspective, because what's going on has probably been going on for a long time. It's just that now I'm hyper focused on things. Oh, that never got done. That never got done.
I mean,
That's
you're hyper focused on things, right?
yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Well,
But also that, go
but
ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna. Let me. So they look very important to me at the moment.
Absolutely. But guess
Right.
what? They look very important. Like, I think what you're speaking to is actually really important, right? Because sometimes we see in our relationships, like, we expect someone to give us all the things that we need, right? Or all the things that,
I
in an
think.
ideal relate. I'm talking about friendships too, right? And then we
Oh
get
yeah.
disappointed, right? Because
Yeah.
this friend is not able to sit there when I'm having a hard day, right?
Yeah.
But she may be a great mommy friend, right? Our kids have an amazing relationship. And when I need to do things with her, amazing,
Yeah.
right? But she just can't sit through when I'm having a hard time, or she just can't give me work advice, right? Or, so sometimes it's also like, well, we focus all of the things that we want onto one person, right? And that's kind of what I'm speaking to, really deciding, where is this friendship the richest for me, right?
Yeah.
Where is it really adding to my life? And that's the way I should keep nourishing it, right? And stay away from expecting, my mom friend to give me business advice if she's never had a business
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
right? Because oftentimes are those expectations that are not being met that we feel disappointed, and then we label the whole friendship as not a good friendship, right? So that's very much a part of it too. Really, like, being intentional and, like, reflect on, well, what are these relationships giving me, where do they serve me best, and focusing on that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then you avoid all of the hyper focusing on all the things that you expected that person to give you. We were going to meet, I was going to tell her all my problems, and she wasn't listening to me, right? Or she didn't have the right thing
Well,
to say,
well, even
right?
even work, even at a lower level. I mean, again, in a lower state, right? What you see could be always happening anyways. The fact that, let's just say, um, she's always late, or it's always late, like, or always running behind. We're always running behind, right? In a low state, running behind can look like something huge.
Yeah, she's wasting my time, she has no respect
All
for
those
me,
different,
right?
right,
Yeah.
right. It could be grounds for divorce, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, at a lower state, things don't look clear. Things look gigantic. They're huge. What looks like from one person's perspective, like, really, you're getting mad over that? Like, no, you just don't understand, right? But that's a low state. What I've noticed though is when I notice myself there and relax enough, get quieter, right? I see things differently. And even to the point where that doesn't mean anything anymore. Like, the meaning behind,
It doesn't, but at the same time, if when you're in that higher state, if the situation still feels,
if it does at that point,
right,
that's
then
a
you
whole
make a
different world.
decision from that
Yeah.
high state. We're not saying that no one ever does anything that's, unacceptable. That does happen, right? It's unacceptable to me, right? I'm not going to label it as unacceptable, like, for all of mankind. It's unacceptable to me and my values, right? But
Yep.
I'm going to make a decision about it from that higher state of being, right? Versus, like, feeling defensive and hurt and, like, the person did it on
Absolutely.
purpose or
Absolutely.
whatever. and,
Absolutely.
and I
Well,
think that's
yeah.
where often, we talked a lot about, like, expectations, right? Let's
Yeah.
talk about agreements, right? That's when make agreements with people around the things that are unacceptable to you, right? Let's say that you're in a work relationship or whatever, right? The person's always showing up late. Okay, I'm going to make a decision from this higher state of being. And when I'm calm, and I'm going to let you know, hey, when you show up like 15 minutes, half hour late, it kind of messes up my schedule. I would really appreciate it if you could be on time or give me enough notice so that I can readjust my schedule,
Or
right?
like,
So
even
that's an
saying,
agreement. When you're late, let
yeah,
me know, right?
but seek first to understand. Like, I've been in those situations, where bringing people in, and saying, seek first to understand, right? So, like, you're constantly late, help me understand what, because in a work environment, you have an agreement, right? I pay you for
Mhm.
8 hours, you be
I
there for
mean,
8 hours,
yeah,
right?
you do when people push those boundaries too, though,
Well, oh,
right? So,
totally, right?
right.
But again, like, help me understand. And it's interesting when I come from that point of view, as opposed to, okay, if you don't show up on time tomorrow, you're kind of fired. There's no discussion, right? They broke an agreement, great. But when I seek to understand first what's really going on, right? I might find out there's a very good logical reason, and
Absolutely.
maybe there's something that can be compromised, something changed, maybe a scheduling change, maybe whatever, kind of a thing. So,
But I
there's
would
not
also,
it's complex in that way.
I mean, it is complex and it's not, right? And sometimes those agreements also need to happen like in an open format. Let's say in a relationship. I'm gonna give a very, like, progressive
So this
example
is this
here.
is this
Are
is
you
the
ready? So
because
so let's say that I'm in a relationship, right? And my upbringing was like, it's monogamous and this is how progressive. I told you it was going to be progressive. This is how I expect you to be, right? But I never had that conversation, right? And the other person actually doesn't believe that that's important to them, right? Have that conversation, right? Make sure that you have that agreement, right?
Hmm.
Listen, if we're going to be together in this relationship, I expect you to be just with me, right? Or listen, if we're going to be in this relationship, I actually want to keep it open because that's what works for me. Does that work for you? That's an agreement, right? I
That would
know
be
it's a little
the
progressive
advantage.
and
It might.
it is the future.
It is the
Sorry to
future.
tell you that. I wasn't raised that way. That was not the way I was raised. That was not the way my relationships were, but that is very much how the newer generation is. That values shift, right? Values shift with society, values shift with
Oh,
progress and evolution, right? So it was an
yeah,
example, it was the first one
yeah.
that came to mind. But I'm just saying, don't even something that we give for, it's obvious that that's the way it is. That's conditioning. Let's be careful because that's conditioning to believe that everyone thinks that that is a rule set in stone. Because guess what? When I became single a few years ago, after being in a relationship, in multiple couple relationships for 20 something years, well, I had to have the little,
Mhm.
uh, reality check. Things have changed, right? And I found it fascinating. I mean, it didn't really apply to me because I haven't been in a relationship, but I had to have the reality check. Oh, look, people are looking at this in a very different way. This is not the way, it has always been, right? And
Yeah.
rules around that have shifted in time too. If you think 100 years ago, like men owned their women, right?
Oh, yeah.
So those things that we believe are set in stone, they're just rules that everyone obeys by. Be careful, have those conversations because that's not a given that everyone is going to show up in a relationship with you the way you expect them to. Make an
Well, and
state your boundaries and make an agreement.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that almost seems like another topic. These things called, as Vision calls them, rules.
Rules. I mean, it is a little bit of a rule, right? It's a widely accepted rule, marriage is exclusive and monogamous, right? And I'm not saying that it's wrong. Please don't,
Well, there's
I'm
that.
not saying that it's wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, most people obey by that, right? But it is inherited. It is something that we inherited. It is something that we've conditioned to see and experience and accept this way. There's nothing wrong with making a different decision as long as that agreement is there. That's
Well,
what
as
I'm
long,
saying,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, so often it happens where one person feels it all of a sudden becomes the norm, and the other person has no clue, and kind of a thing, right? I think they call that whatever. But yeah, no, it is.
Sorry, Rick, to bring you into the dating world of 2022.
I yes, yeah, yeah. It's an eye opener. I mean, everything's an eye opener. Things are changing so quickly. Labels and identification and norms and
Yeah,
you know,
exactly, right?
like
Homosexuality wasn't accepted either,
well,
right? So look at how much we have evolved collectively,
well,
right?
and over time, the conditioning, right? Like
The
what was
conditioning.
what was socially acceptable in the 1950s is not tolerated right now, right? Like and probably for good reason. Like that don't want to get into that part, but you know, yes, we
So
change.
that to the point that what is socially acceptable or socially accepted is
Yeah,
not always right.
yes,
It's only does it fit you? Does it feel right to you?
yeah,
Right? I wanted to give this really extreme example just to give a different perspective because that is out there. Trust
yeah.
me,
Okay,
it
I'll
is.
trust you. All right. Anyways, hey, man, oh
On
man,
that note, stop
yeah,
talking.
yeah. Thank This has been another enlightening conversation.
It has, but I think the goal of the conversation was to just really look at all the different shades of relationships and what they mean.
Absolutely.
And it's impossible to do that in an hour,
It's the
right?
surface. It's the
So
surface. Yeah.
it's impossible. But the more you look at, like to summarize the more you work on yourself and look at yourself and you understand yourself and you stand in your own power and confident of what you want and who you want to be and what your values are, and the more you're going to show up powerfully in your relationships and stop expecting things from people,
Yeah.
and just show up and state what it is that you want and make agreements, and and grow together. If you're, if you're with someone, grow together versus blend into each other, right? Because blending comes from the need to like have your gaps filled, and that's never a healthy place, because those gaps don't need to be filled, they need to be healed, right? And
Mm.
so if you're looking
Very,
to filling them, you're not healing them, and
yeah.
so you're going to constantly be looking to filling them, because the need is the healing, the need is not the filling.
Yeah. Really good. I love how you rhyme that all together. Very, very.
I
Anyway,
thought you were going to say about non-monogamy.
no, 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 no. That's another topic. Here we go. Anyways, thank you again. Thanks everybody for joining us. Those that are watching the recording, uh, please leave comments. We love comments and questions, anything like that. You can get a hold of us. All our links are in the descriptions. Please follow
Absolutely.
us, like us. We're
Subscribe,
very needy this way.
all
Okay,
of it. Very needy. And come
subscribe.
and join me tomorrow for a deeper dive
Oh
into
yes,
this.
deeper dive.
I
Yes,
can't promise that I'll talk about non-monogamy, but we will dive deeper into relationships, communication, what you can do more practically. It's more of a practical type
yeah.
of
And
session.
how do they find the link for that?
So if they go in YouTube
Yeah.
or Facebook, in
Yeah.
the link tree, they'll find my meetup link. The
Yeah.
link is in there. All the events that I ever hold are going to be on Meetup. It's also on Instagram. It's everywhere.
Okay.
Instagram, Facebook.
Okay.
It's tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern.
Eastern time.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent.
Deep dive into relationships.
Yes. Yes. And the feedback was fabulous from last week, I understand.
It
So
was,
yeah,
yeah, it
I have
was.
a feeling
It's
this
been,
one will be too.
yes, and I'll be recording it. So
Okay. Excellent. So people that are there can watch the recording, kind of a thing, right?
well,
Later.
people are going to be there, yeah, and then I
Yeah.
can make that
Yeah.
recording available to
Yeah.
those who couldn't make it. So,
Excellent. Okay. All righty. Have a
all
great
right,
week.
Rick,
Have a great
amazing
week, everybody.
conversation.
Build
See
build
you
those
next
relationships.
Wednesday. Have those conversations and make your agreements.
All righty. Bye.